I waited so long. Don't stop. Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. More than power, never ever after work is over. Work it, make it, do it, makes us
I might not be the right one, but there's something about us I want to say, 'cause there's something between us anyway. I might not be the right one, it might not be the right time, but there's something about us I've got to do. Some kind of secret I will share with you. I need you more than anything in my life. I want you more than anything in my life. I'll miss you more than anyone in my life. I love you more than anyone in my life.
Sonic Forces is better than Sonic Mania. That is my genuine opinion, and before you slam this video with a dislike and leave an angry comment, allow me to explain. Hello everyone in YouTube.
Hello, cinephiles. Whenever I think of The Shining, I'm always amazed at the sheer number of iconic moments in a single movie. So I wanted to take a look at the writing process and see how we ended up with such a masterpiece of cinema. Now, there have been plenty of great videos on The Shining, as well as videos specifically about the script, but I want to go deeper. How was it written, and what exactly is happening from a storytelling perspective? What was it like to collaborate with Kubrick on this screenplay? How did the movie wind up so different than Stephen King's original novel? How close did they stick to the screenplay during production? What were Kubrick's thoughts on horror? All that and more on this episode of Making Film. In 1975, Barry Lyndon had hit the theaters, and Stanley Kubrick was eager to find a subject for his next film. After he finishes a film, he just begins to read anything he can get his hands on, hoping to find a subject that has certain cinematic possibilities.
I don't find any systematic way of reading. It's a terrifying prospect to when you realize all the books there are in the world that you're never going to read. So what you should read. So I find by just reading at random, that seems like the best approach.
There was an interesting bit in American Film magazine which noted that Kubrick acquired many books on the supernatural. He would sit in his office and read. If after a few pages he didn't think the book was interesting, he'd, quote, fling it across the room against the wall. Apparently, Kubrick's secretary outside noticed that the sounds of books hitting the wall had stopped. She went in and found him reading The Shining. It's hard to tell if there's much truth to this story, but John Kelly, an executive at Warner Brothers, sent Kubrick the manuscript of The Shining, and when asked about the book, Kubrick said, "The Shining I found very compulsive reading, and I thought the plot, ideas, and structure were much more imaginative than anything I've ever read in the genre. Warner Brothers had bought the rights to Stephen King's book shortly after it was published in 1977, and they also bought a screenplay based on the book, written by King himself. However, Kubrick wanted to use the novel as simply a jumping-off point, and therefore he didn't read King's screenplay, nor did he wish to collaborate with him on a new screenplay. It's interesting to note that nearly all of Kubrick's films are adapted from previous books, and there are a couple reasons for this. First, Kubrick felt that there aren't many original screenwriters who are at a high enough caliber as some of the greatest novelists, unless they plan on directing the film themselves. And second, and perhaps most important, is that it allowed him to see the story more objectively, and as Kubrick puts it, quote, "If you read a story which someone else has written, you have the irreplaceable experience of reading it for the first time. This is something which you obviously cannot have if you write an original story." This way, Kubrick could experience the story as a whole, in an entirely unique experience, and then evaluate what it was about the book that affected him. He could get at the core of what was good about the story, strip away the clutter, and enhance the most brilliant aspects with a profound sense of hindsight, something we probably all wish we could do with certain movies. For the task of adapting the book for the screen, Kubrick enlisted the help of novelist Diane Johnson. He had met her in 1976 when he considered making a film adaptation of her book, The Shadow Knows, a psychological thriller about a woman harassed by an unknown menace. They had discussed the book extensively, and at the time, she was teaching a class at UC Berkeley on the Gothic novel. So when he ultimately decided on pursuing a film adaptation of The Shining, he thought that it would be interesting to work with her. Kubrick said, "She seemed to be the ideal collaborator," which indeed, she proved to be. In early 1977, Johnson spoke at length with Kubrick over 10 days, and then she received an outline later that year. It wasn't until March 17, 1978, that Johnson began working with Kubrick on the story full-time. She said, "The driver would come and pick me up every morning and drive me out there, to Kubrick's house. I would stay all day, through dinner. We would work in the morning, and then Stanley would have a lot of things to do because he was doing the sets, and the second unit were already in America." Johnson and Kubrick had long discussions around literature, particularly Gothic horror, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, and stories by Edgar Allan Poe. They also watched movies every night. Many of them starred Jack Nicholson, specifically to see whether they liked him more as a depressive or a hyped-up animated character. They discussed The Shining for over a month before writing a single word. Many of their discussions started from simple questions posed by Kubrick. Johnson said, "Stanley uses the Socratic method. Is the husband a nice man? Does his wife love him? What kind of clothes would she wear?" In this way, Kubrick got to know and understand his characters before setting them in motion for themselves. Johnson also said Kubrick's approach was very literary and intellectual. He was big on outlines, big on lists, and he focused clearly on expressing the implications of a scene or the problems that it posed. They also drew a fair amount of inspiration from Bruno Bettelheim's study of fairy tales titled The Uses of Enchantment and the writings of Sigmund Freud, but more on that later. Johnson and Kubrick each came up with their own short plot outline for The Shining based on their talks, and then came together to compare, rearrange scenes, and ultimately write a, quote, more fleshed out outline. They worked on the screenplay for 11 weeks in England, and then Johnson left for the United States. She returned to England in 1978 for a few weeks to work on the script during shooting. Johnson said, "There were a lot of phone conversations about details and things. When I left the second time, there was a pretty good script. Stanley went on to make changes, but most of them he checked with me." With Johnson's contributions to the screenplay, the film might be very different, and it is important to recognize the work that she put into crafting such a great adaptation with Kubrick. On October 17, 1979, Kubrick had her contact the Writers Guild to notify them that he wanted there to be shared screenwriting credit on all of the publicity and advertising. Kubrick's first treatment, completed on June 20, 1977, was 36 pages and contained 61 scenes. The treatment ends when Grady removes the bolt to the pantry door, freeing Jack. This is one of the most important moments in the film, as it is the first time there's any evidence of a ghost having any effect on the physical world. All supernatural aspects of the film up to that point could very well be happening only in the minds of the characters, or have some other explanation.
You did this to him, didn't you?
I've always enjoyed the genre, and I felt that I hadn't really seen a picture that presented, that genre. There have been pictures which have had shocks in them and which have had some wonderfully gory or horrific moments, but to properly, present that type of a story in a way where you could disbelief and get involved in the story, and the supernatural events were presented in a way which seemed dramatically realistic. What I found so ingenious about the way the novel was written, as the various supernatural events occurred, you always wonder to yourself, how is the writer ever going to explain this? The way the story is written, you assume, as you read it, that the things that are happening are probably going to be a product of his imagination. And I think this allows you to start accepting them and not worry. It isn't really until the bolt is open that you're absolutely certain that it isn't a product of imagination.
The guiding principle for Kubrick's journey into horror came from an H.P. Lovecraft essay that states, "In all things that are mysterious, never explain." Kubrick expands upon this in an interview saying, "As long as what happens stimulates people's imagination, their sense of the uncanny, their sense of anxiety and fear, as long as it doesn't within itself have any obvious inner contradictions, it's just a matter of, as it were, building on the imagination, imaginary ideas, surprises, etc., working in this area of feeling." Kubrick was keen on using the audience's own imagination against them, and by introducing mystery and the suggestion of horror, the audience can fill in the blanks with their own fears. The story beats are very simple. There isn't a big convoluted story to follow like in many horror films. Instead, we are watching with a mindset based more on emotion over logic, but we get both. We get lost in the mystery, but we are also concerned with survival. We experience the fear of the mystery and the logical thinking of how to escape the situation. Kubrick uses the first expositional scenes to tell us, more or less, that this guy is going to go crazy and try and murder his family, and this boy is a clairvoyant. In this way, we are placed in a similar situation as Danny. We know Jack will go crazy, but there isn't anything we can do about it. Then we are left to watch it all unfold.
Well, you can rest assured, Mr. Ullman, that's not going to happen with me.
In early versions of the script, quite a great deal was explained. In fact, there was a storyline that was discarded that involved Danny finding a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings of all the strange things that have happened in the Overlook Hotel. There was another version where Jack finds it in the cellar, as well as a version where the scrapbook just appears on his desk. We can see the scrapbook on his desk in the final film, however, there's no mention of it. Another guiding principle was raised by Kubrick in a separate interview. He says, "In fantasy, you want things to have the appearance of being as realistic as possible. People should behave in the mundane way they normally do. You have to be especially careful about this in scenes which deal with the bizarre or fantastic details of the story. This contrast makes the extraordinary more powerful, and we can see this in Danny and the ballroom scene with Grady are some of the earliest plot points that made it through each version and into the final film." The second draft of the screenplay from July 12, 1977, actually contained a scene with Danny and the woman in room 237, which happens off screen in the final film. What's interesting is that this version of the script describes the ball rolling up to Danny with the sound of the Grady twins giggling, and possibly glimpses of them, letting us know not only who rolled the ball, but that the twins and the woman are somehow connected. And as some have pointed out, it is possible that Kubrick isn't cutting between the old woman and Jack and the same woman in the tub. They might be two different people. You can see that one has much shorter hair. Perhaps they are the Grady twins. As for the third draft, from August 1st, 1977, we could have actually seen Jack's nightmare of him killing Wendy and Danny, as well as a flashback where Jack beats up a student, which caused him to be fired from his teaching job. According to an essay by Ursula von Keats, these scenes were removed to ensure that we are kept in the present as the characters are experiencing it. The fourth draft, dated August 15th, 1977, is the first time there's some kind of ending written, and boy is it a doozy. Jack surprises Wendy and Danny after he's freed from the pantry, and he injures her. She hits Jack with a rifle butt, and then Halloran arrives at the hotel and is hit in the head by Jack. Wendy kills Jack and rushes to help Halloran, and then a grinning Grady
For this list, we are but pulled out Talk Village featuring Electric Youth is widely known X's purpose. Rarely Jesus and Mary Chain, Lost in Translation, and giving Jesus a hint of what we all know as much as the wasn't meant to be. Nevertheless, return home. Number 8. Concentrate. Include the film nature of particular writer act nude. Number 7. My Way by Sid Vicious.
My life.
Stand By Me. Number 6. Any luck? You at least had a few dedicated friends standing by your side during the bad times. Same name.
Just
Friend or playing with his always be with him in spirit, whether he's reminiscing alone at his computer or playing with his own son on a summer day. Afterwards featuring Gary Jewell, Donnie Darko.
Because I am Donnie Darko.
Decades after its initial popularity died out, Mad World by Tears for Fears found their Simon and Garfunkel, The Graduate, is all about Funkel Lane. There continue. Don't You Forget About Me, teenage differ from mess with you lose yourself by Eminem, of whom with a lot rabbit doesn't see. Number 1, Where Is My Mind by also the narrative as the definitely theater at For more